I kind of have like, I could get preachy, but like I really do think like social dance is the answer to like all of our problems, especially our 21st century problems. You know, we talk about like no one wants to leave the house, no one knows how to like communicate, no one knows how to like be physically intimate with someone. Like just go swing dancing and you'll learn just everything you need to know. That's the end of my sermon. Thank you. Like, you know, most people like drum on things in the car, like your steering wheel and stuff, and like my dad did that, and like I did that too in the back seat on that like whatever that little like cushiony thing is in the middle, you know. It was I definitely had an interest in like rhythm, drums, percussion. So I found a great drum teacher, or my parents found a great drum teacher for me, and I started taking drum lessons about the age of 6 or 5. And I was very, very serious about that. I had a very serious teacher, a Juilliard grad, in like classical percussion. I like read like, you know, took my studies very seriously. It wasn't like I was like having fun in the drum kit. We were like reading music and like understanding notation and like doing it very academically, which was amazing. It served me in the long run like so phenomenally because I understood rhythm in like a very structured way, whereas a lot of people kind of like into it. When I was 10, I saw tap dancing on television, and I said, "Oh, that looks cool. Like makes sense to me. I should try it." So I talked to my mom. And she actually had noticed that like I really enjoyed dancing like on my bed and like really enjoyed dancing when I was younger. And she tried to take me to dance classes. But as you know, like when you try to take someone to like a dance class and they're like 6 or 7, you look in the room and it's like all these like little girls in like pink tutus. The agreement with my mom and I was that if we could find a class that had one other guy in it, then I would take the class. And we went to what was then the Northern Westchester Center for the Arts, which was like half an hour away. And it turns out they had an all boys beginner tap class, which like for the time was like completely unheard of. Like I didn't know of any like all boys beginner tap classes, and there were like 7 or 8 kids signed up. So I joined that class, and like quite immediately it was quite clear that um, it just made a lot of sense to me. Uh, the idea of it, it was like kind of everything that I already knew from studying percussion manifested into kind of a more physical form. I stayed. Her name is Jennifer Dell. She's still teaching, and she has a studio in Westchester called the Pulse Performing Arts Studio, and they actually still have a really strong boys program. Still, the year after I started studying at that studio, she moved and opened her own studio, and I followed her because she was starting a student performance like tap dance company, in which I was an inaugural member. And yeah, I mean, from there I just like kind of kept trying to digest as much tap dance information as possible. The way that manifested itself, the way it does for a lot of people, is continuing year-round like studies at like a dance studio, and then like over the summer going to like intensives or like conservatory programs or whatever. The first program I went to was Break the Floor, which is still a thing, Break the Floor Productions. And then I went to Tap Kids, and then I like, you know, from there, once I got there, there's this kind of fascinating thing and a lot of people don't know about. There's a whole community of young tap dancers in America. And they come from everywhere. Like, you know, it's not just like they're all from New York. There are a lot from New York, but there are people from Chicago and people from LA and people from Chapel Hill, North Carolina, like you wouldn't believe. And they all kind of come to these summer camps and they find each other and say like, I love tap dance. I didn't know you love tap dance. And it's kind of a really magical thing. That was kind of my first introduction to the idea that there was like a greater world of people who were enthusiastic and passionate about the arts. Specifically like the arts that I was excited about, tap dance. After I grew up at that first dance studio, I found this incredible teacher, mentor named David Ryder, and he was kind of the most influential teacher and probably like dance figure in my life. So it seems only appropriate that after 3 years of studying with him, he closed down his dance studio and went into the seminary to become a Catholic priest. And he is now a Catholic priest on Staten Island. And he was young too. He was like in his like mid to late 20s, but he just understood that like that was his calling, and he had to follow it with full force. So, although if you look on YouTube, like tap dancing priest, he's like kind of an internet sensation. Like a video that he made when he was in the Vatican got like several million hits. You know, like tap dancing priest. It's like it's a classic. But after he closed down his studio and kind of assessing how I would continue dancing. It's funny though, once I started studying dance, it seemed quite clear that I was going to like continue doing so. It was just a matter of like how and when and why someone does that. Um, my father left high school early. My mother finished high school early. My brother finished high school. But so it seems like I should probably finish high school early. So we like kind of made those arrangements for me to finish in 3 years. And after those 3 years, I went to Jacob's Pillow that summer, and I did 2 of the programs at the school there. And that was incredible because, as you know about Jacob's Pillow Dance Festival, you kind of immediately become immersed in the greater dance community, which I didn't really understood. I didn't really know existed until I got there, and all of a sudden I'm like, sitting at lunch with like Camille Brown's company and Kyle Abraham like the next week, and I'm seeing Trey McIntyre's company, and I'm like, this is crazy. Like, who are all these people? And they're all phenomenal. So that was kind of a crash course in like what the dance world looks like. And then I moved to New York the day after I finished the program. I was 17, and I had no idea what I was doing. I was very lonely. I took like 4 dance classes a day because like I had nothing better to do. I was just like kind of on this like crazy tip of like trying to understand what exactly I was doing in New York. And I had met Michelle Dorrance as a teenager, like in a pay-to-play like intensive scenario, and I danced for her. And I saw her again in New York, and she said, "Oh, like what are you doing here?" Blah, blah. She hadn't seen me in a while. And I said, "I just moved to New York." And she's like, "What? Caleb, I'm gonna put you in everything." And like that is like totally Michelle's like enthusiasm. If you meet her, she just like says it, but she actually meant it, which was kind of incredible. And a couple months later, she told me she was like putting together a show for Dance Space Project, a shared evening with Dormisha Sumbry Edwards, and she asked me to dance in her stuff. And I, was in the middle of like being like a professional like class taker in New York, and I was like, sure, why not? And that turned out to be the first Dorrance dance performance. And also, Michelle actually recommended me to dance for Dormisha Sumbry Edwards half of it. So essentially, like for the 2 or 3 months of rehearsal, I got to like run from Michelle Dorrance, who was like one of my major tap dance idols growing up, to Dormisha Sumbry Edwards, one of my other major tap dance idols growing up. Like all tap dancers will joke that all tap dancers seem to just know each other already. And if you don't, like you probably have several hundred mutual friends on Facebook. I remember someone, I was on tour in Germany with West Side Story, and I was looking for tap dance always. And someone said, "Oh, I heard about this like studio in town where they offer tap dance." And I looked up the guy's name, and we had 150 mutual friends on Facebook. I'd never heard of him in my life. But like there we were with all these friends, and of course once we met each other, we realized that blah blah blah, etc. Yeah, as far as like finding people to work with, I don't think I ever really realized this until it's too late, and I'm like standing in the room with people I've known for years. But like everyone I work with in my company, for the most part, is someone that like I kind of met earlier on in my life, and then kept kind of recurring. They're kind of like motifs until it just seemed natural to work together. But I guess that kind of makes sense. The people that you see the most, that you've had a lot of shared experiences with, tend to be people who share similar values, similar aesthetics, and similar ideas about like what kind of dance could and should be made. As an example, Macy Sullivan, who's someone I've collaborated with probably more than anyone, I met when I was a student at Jacob's Pillow, in the tap program there. It was the first ever tap program at Jacob's Pillow. And she was a Juilliard student at the time, but had a passion for tap that she continues to support through college. And like at first we just thought we were like friends, like really enjoying like learning tap dance together. And then she asked me to dance in a piece for her at Juilliard, and then I asked her to dance in a piece for me, and then we danced in a swing dance company together, and then we danced in a contemporary dance company together. And as the years go on, we just kind of find ourselves in more scenarios in which it makes sense to kind of collaborate, which is thrilling. And someone I also work with a lot, Gabriel Wins from San Diego. I met him at the Tap Kids Summer Intensive in like 2008 or something. And it's not even a form of like nepotism or like I love working with my friends. I've actually like hired in the last year people to dance for me that like I had never really met before, but who came like really highly recommended just like through the dance world. But the beauty of it is that there is a kind of blurred line between like social and personal community and like professional community within what we do, since dance is so personal. Like the choreography of Michelle Dorrance and the choreography of Randy Skinner are two very different beasts. I admire and like love dancing them both, but they're very different experiences aesthetically, and you know, like what they're trying to express are very different. I'd say a lot of tap dancers actually, like within like kind of the concert tap dance community, don't really see themselves as a good fit for musicals unless the choreographer is someone like a Savion Glover or a Warren Carlyle. You know, but at the same time, there are a lot of people that I've worked with in Dorrance Dance who have also, you know, they've been Rockettes and they're in Shuffle Along or After Midnight. You know, so there is a lot of crossover. But I guess the best way to answer that is to say that there really is no difference. Tap dance is tap dance, and I don't really believe in defining like a hard line in between like, you know, theater tap and like rhythm tap. I actually really don't believe in that. I think that's like kind of a very easy way for people to give you like a quick like 2-word explanation of like a quick 2-word like piece of context, like what you're about to see is this or that. But they all are trying to achieve the same thing. You know, they're both going for a kind of like musically driven choreographic experience, you know, for the most part, I'd say. I'll give like 2 examples. One, which is the piece that kind of is getting the most play these days, is this tap dance piece uh, set to Glenn Gould's recordings of Bach's Goldberg Variations. Classical music and tap dance is not a new idea. There was a whole show called Classical Savion that Savion Glover did. Dean Diggins did it in like the 80s. Like people have been doing it forever. But it still seems to be like we performed it yesterday. Someone's like, classical music and tap dance. I'd never thought of that. I'm like, yeah, but what's to say about that? The music is incredibly exciting rhythmically. You know, it's like it's endlessly like kind of innovative, considering that they're very old compositions. They're by Bach. So, but they're each really short. Like each composition is like maybe on the recording like from 30 seconds to like a minute. So you can kind of like fly through these ideas, and like each 30-second to minute long section can be like a new exploration, very like quick but very deep into one singular idea, and at the end of it you just kind of drop it. And the fun of that is that it's allowed, you know, it's allowed me to kind of explore a number of ideas very quickly and play a lot with composition. Because instead of like, oh, we have this like 6-minute section followed by this 2-minute section, like I have like 15 45-second sections, and I just kind of like move them around and change things and do what I want. It's kind of like a choreographer's dream to like get to play that quickly and that easily with music and dance. What inspires me otherwise? I have some really phenomenal dancers working with me, of styles that I don't think always get their fair shake. I think people in what I seem to keep calling traditional American dance forms, meaning like tap, jazz, Lindy, and the kind of like greater like vernacular jazz vocabulary. I just don't think they always get their fair amount of employment, like for lack of a better term, or like the best chances to express themselves. And so I'm really excited to provide more opportunity to dancers who are at the top of their field, and just because of you know the way things are stacked right now with dance programming, just don't have as much or as many opportunities to do what they do with like. Here's what I'll tell you. It's definitely changing. I think curators and presenters and producers are smart. I think they recognize that within tap dance and within kind of these greater American dance forms, there's a lot to be excited about. For dance audiences, for non-dance audiences, for people who just really appreciate good music, there's a lot there. So maybe there hasn't been that much tap dance programming or jazz dance or these kind of like traditional American dance forms programming. But we're gonna see that change majorly in the next decade. Not to try to prophesize, but that is going to happen. If only because like people really like tap dance, and people seem to enjoy tap dance more. And I'd say we're kind of at a prime point in history to begin reassessing our sense of American identity. That's like a big philosophical thought. But here we are in America, kind of trying to understand who we are. And that is a conversation about race, that's a conversation about gender, that's a conversation about politics. And there's no better time than to look into the history of arts in America and decide how does that inform our current identity. Tap dances, are not our newest. Hip hop is our newest tradition, but is one of our, when you hear tap dance, you immediately think America and the early 1900s and the Harlem Renaissance and the Jazz Age and Gene Kelly and Fred Astaire. This is definitely an American tradition that has since exploded to an international phenomenon. But I think this is the time that we're kind of ready to take this on. I think obviously there's no arguing, and everyone will say it's awesome that Michelle Dorrance and Dorrance Dance has done that. Has definitely got people excited. But I think from that kind of success story will come many more companies, many more dancers, and even better, more diversity in the dance community. I mean, the toughest thing is that there are a lot of places that just don't have the infrastructure yet to support tap dance. And by that I mean, if you want to tour tap dance, you gotta tour a floor, most likely, a proper wood floor that can amplify and support tap dance. So that's one. Pretty simple. Two is appropriate miking for said tap floor. If you are large and in charge enough as a company, you bring your own floor, you bring your own mics. But the phrase to describe touring contemporary and modern and ballet companies is lights and tights. I don't know if you've ever heard that. It's you bring your lights and you bring your tights, and it fits in a suitcase, and then at the end of the show you just pick it up and leave, and the Marley stays there. But it is much more involved for tap dance. And sometimes you feel I've felt bad in the past when I've asked people to present me, and I'm oh, we really need this kind of floor, and we really need these kind of mics. But it's that's how the dance is seen best. It's not me being a prima donna. It's me saying if you want to see tap dance and if you want to hear tap dance, this is what we got to do. And again, I mean, I'm hoping as part of my prophecy for the next 10 years, I hope that more producers and presenters will understand that it's worth investing in an in-house tap floor, in appropriate miking, because people are really into tap dance, and it's much more effective when you can hear and see it. I mean, perhaps it's just because I've spent the past 10 days out of New York on a lovely cross-country road trip. But I kind of feel better than ever. I think it's very easy, as anyone will tell you, to get caught up in the rush and the energy of New York. And I think the thing that's been toughest to kind of remind myself of is that one's life and one's work is a long-term investment as opposed to something that has a quick turnover. I know, right? It's preach. But how long did it take me? 6 years to realize this? And it's not once I realize this that I won't have my struggles and say why isn't this happening? And I thought this was gonna, we all have those moments. But I think for me, more recently, perhaps I'm getting old. But I think I'm trying to remember that, kind of imagine timelines for oneself and one's work and what one hopes one's life would look like are kind of silly, and you have to be willing to embrace things kind of taking their own time, and you taking the time that you need over someone else taking more or less time. I think particularly in New York, it's very easy to begin comparing your experience to the experience of others. As you sit on the subway and you look at the person across from you, and you kind of wonder about what they're doing here and why they're continuing to live in New York while the rent is too damn high. but you should. I think it's important to remind oneself that like this is your experience, and you can make what you want of it, and it's worth kind of focusing on that as opposed to getting caught up in other people's experiences. And that I think is actually what's kept me most sane in New York. That and plenty of bubble tea, plenty of board games with my brother, and I've recently started skateboarding, like as far as commuting, and it's made me really happy. Um, I'm also a little nervous that I'm gonna break something, but I think I'm okay. Yeah. I did the European tour of West Side Story in 2012, and I remember the first time our orchestra played. We had an orchestra of 23, I want to say, maybe 26. And the first time, the opening line of West Side Story, da 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 da, and like, sure, like just those intervals like can make your like blood tingle. Now imagine like 23 orchestra members like at full volume with like monitors in your face, and you're just like, I think as far as like things that I'm really kind of proud to be involved in, like the legacy of West Side Story is really a masterpiece. And the experience of dancing that for 8 months or so on the road, I never imagined that I would enjoy dancing something almost 200 times. I don't know if I did really 200 times, but every night when you get out there and you're like, how am I going to do this again? And then you hear the orchestra play that opening line, or play Dance at the Gym, or play, like anything, somewhere, or it reinvigorates you. That's definitely an experience I'll never forget. Bowing on our opening night in Berlin at the Deutsche Oper, that was incredible. Kind of more recently, I've had some really beautiful moments performing with my company, because it's a very interesting headspace to be in when you're performing in a work that you've also created. Because I think it's very easy to detach yourself from the audience reaction if you didn't make the work yourself, if you didn't choreograph it, and conceive it. Because you can say, well, like, if they don't like applaud enthusiastically, or if they don't really love it, like, I still did a good job. Like, my part is still good. I mean, that's not how it works, but it's very easy if you want to protect yourself to like detach yourself from like mixed feelings. But like when I have been standing on stage with my company recently, it's felt like a very like deep and kind of like sensitive place of myself being shared, and reactions have been really positive, and like the conversations I've been able to have with people afterwards have been really lovely. Yeah, I mean, also like going back to Jacob's Pillow this summer, I presented my company on the Inside Out stage there, and kind of standing out there and recognizing that like kind of my first performance outside of high school and like high school like student performance groups was on the Inside Out stage, and being there again. And actually my company's performance started with Macy Sullivan and I doing a duet, and my first Inside Out performance at Jacob's Pillow, Macy Sullivan and I danced a duet choreographed by Derek Grant. And I just kept thinking, like, how crazy is this? Like, like 6 years later, like so much changes, and yet like here I am performing on the same stage with the same person. And it's moments like that you could, I guess, one, if you wanted to look at it in a negative way, say like, why am I not on some other stage with some other people? Like, how come one doesn't really like catapult into like other dimensions? But the truth is, like, you kind of live the same life forever. So it's not like things change in a way that you really don't recognize yourself years down the line. You're still the same person that like woke up 10 years ago and like went to high school. So it's kind of really cool to like think about the people that follow your through line and the experiences that you can kind of connect together. And say like, this is what a life looks like. This is like, I am currently living my life. It's not like I will live my life in 5 years when I'm dancing with said company. Like, the work I'm doing now, the people I hang out with now, like, these are the stories I'll tell in 10 years.